welcome to the Might Ramble podcast.
Ron, tell us about that.
Not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5.
Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds.
From this distant vantage point, the Earth might not seem of any particular interest.
Hello, everyone. Before we begin, the views expressed in this podcast are our personal views and do not reflect those of any employer, university, research institution, funding body, or collaborator. Participation by guests does not imply endorsement of my views, nor does my hosting imply endorsement of theirs. Okay, that's all.
All right. Welcome to episode 15 of the Might Ramble podcast. We're on a bit of a field trip today. We've come down to the University of Texas Austin campus, and my guest here today is Michela Marinelli, and she goes by Mickey.
Hello.
So I thought as a starting point, Mickey, if you just wanted to give us a little bit of your background. I think you grew up, I want to say, in Italy.
Yes.
And spent some time in France, and then now you've been over in the U.S. for a while. So I was just wondering if you could walk me through a little bit of just how you got to where you are currently.
Yes, so I was born and raised in Italy, and I did research in Italy where there are not that many funds, and it's not a meritocratic society, at least when I was doing it. Maybe it's different now. And at one point, they proposed that I get hired there as a high school degree level technician. And when they said that, I was wondering, but we don't have anyone who has a high school degree and wants to be hired. No, Mickey, it's for you. I said, but I have a college degree. I said, but Mickey, you get what you can get. And so it sort of opened my brain, like, this doesn't make sense. And at that time, there was the opportunity to do a Ph.D. in France. And so with someone who did addiction research. And so I moved there.
Yeah,
and I did my Ph.D. there.
We'll slightly pause. I made a mistake in that Mickey is a professor here at the University of Texas, Austin.
Yes.
I think she has an appointment in the Department of Neurology.
No, well, I have several appointments. So my principal one is neuroscience, but then I also have a 0% appointment in neurology,
Yep.
and a courtesy appointment in psychiatry and one in pharmacy. So
Wow. So a lot of appointments, and Mickey primarily studies addiction at both, I think, a molecular level, like I want to say animal models.
Yes.
I would say potentially brain imaging.
Brain recordings, neurophysiology, so electrophysiology.
Yeah, and her primary focus, to the best of my understanding, isn't necessarily what is addiction, but what makes people susceptible to addiction, right? Why do some people try something and get hooked and other people don't? And, unlocking the actual biology, so that goes into someone ending up, with addiction and someone not.
Yes, exactly. I do not study humans, although I am involved in some human-related organizations that deal with humans. So I always try to be connected with humans, not to lose touch with that's the ultimate goal. But I do work with rodent models, and we look at inter-individual differences. So not every rodent is the same. They're genetically different, but they're also, inherently different because they might have had even different experiences. And so I look at these inherent individual differences, but also those induced by life events like stress, for example, or prior drug exposure that can exacerbate or induce or promote addiction.
Right. Certain types of stresses, say like maybe a rat doesn't have quite enough food, or maybe it's been isolated for a bit, right? And putting them under these conditions, right, where maybe they're not feeling the best in a way, right? Where
that's exactly it. So both those things, isolation will exacerbate or promote certain drug uses, and also not enough food insecurity.
Sure.
And it's so difficult with humans, right? Because if you look at a person who's addicted, oftentimes they will have food insecurity and they will be isolated. And you wonder, did the addiction do that to them? Or were they like that to begin with? And it's very difficult to discern. But we can study that much more easily in animals and create these situations and see that it actually...
We're able to control for far more things when we work with animals as opposed to humans. Humans are, I say there's a wide range of things that individual humans do, right? Well, thank you a little bit for your background, but if you wanted to continue about this PhD in France.
Oh, yes. So I went to a PhD in France. And then at that time, the way it works in France to get a national position, like the equivalent to NIH, is it's a national competition. It's not within a lab. You don't go to a lab and get hired in that lab. It's a national, then you can choose where to work.
So this is after your PhD?
This is after my PhD. And I tried to do that to get a job in France, because at that point I thought it was a very nice place.
Sure.
And I didn't win the competition at the time. So they recommended that I do a postdoctoral period in France, in United States. And I went to United States. I went to the Chicago area. And at that point...
Was this, just to pause for a sec, so the lab in France, I want to say it was like Le Born, is this correct?
It was in Bordeaux.
Bordeaux.
Yes. Yes.
Gotcha.
Should I say that? Maybe.
Oh, no, it's all
yeah.
good. And then you came over to the U.S. and then...
Yeah, and then actually I first went... Backtrack. I made a mistake. So I was in France and I got my PhD, and then I wanted a job in France, and to do that they recommended I had a postdoctoral experience. So I went to United States and started my postdoctoral period, and I did my competition to get a job in France, and I didn't win the competition. It's done by competition slightly different. And I was very sad about it. So I stayed another year in United States, and then I did the competition and I won it. And this time I was sad also, because by then I had experienced research in the United States, which was very positive for me. Yeah. But I had won, so I went back to France, and I stayed there about 3 years, and then came back eventually to the United States to do research. Yeah.
And all along the way here, at what point did you start researching addiction?
Oh, so as soon as I went to France, I started researching addiction. So when I was in Italy, I researched on stress and various other things. And I then continued on stress and addiction in France. Yep. And then when I went to the United States, I did various aspects of still stress, individual differences, and addiction.
Yeah. And was it like, I don't know what the specific niche of your initial addiction research was, but I'm very curious about, you ended up researching, what makes someone vulnerable to addiction, right?
Yeah,
and
so that was actually, it started off with my mentor in France. That was his big thing. He discovered that some rats take drugs more readily than others, and it can be predicted by plainly their motor activity. Those that are more active are the ones that end up being more addiction prone. And so that started really early on, but I kept this idea of not everyone's the same in everything that I do. And now we're starting to treat things differently, luckily. And I hope that even in humans, we will do that more so than we're doing now. Where obviously humans are even more diverse than animals. But often when we do a clinical study, even though they're nicely randomized, good groups, it might not work, but maybe the population, it might work in a very small subset of the population. Sure. And we need a big sample size to see that. Yeah. Sort of like cancer, right? So some cancers are, let's say breast cancer, estrogen receptor positive, and some are not. So if you treat one in one way or another, you might say, oh, it doesn't work. But in reality, it will not work on that subpopulation, but it might work on another. Right?
Might be a subpopulation where you get a hit, right, and it works, and then another subpopulation that doesn't. But the thing is, you don't know these things unless you identify the subpopulations, right?
Exactly.
So as with your mentor, so this was your PhD in France, and you're researching addiction, and was your mentor, I guess, like, what was his exposure to addiction? Like, what's kind of the story there?
He was not exposed to addiction, but the mentor that I had during my postdoctoral period in
the U.S.
In the U.S. was, and he had alcohol use disorder and eventually died from it. Yes, and I was actually holding his hand when he died from it. So
yeah, I mean, that's a big moment that would definitely impact you, like this person that taught me a lot about
the irony, right, in a way,
for
that
sure,
he was studying addiction,
trying to solve a problem that trying to solve a problem for others,
but it's still addiction, right? So there's some parallels.
I mean, there's a saying, right, a drug is a drug is a drug, right? If you're taking something to try and change how you feel, a lot of the mechanics there work very similarly. And I guess as you got your PhD and then a postdoc over here in the U.S. and then you go back to France for, I want to say it was like something that might be analogous to the NIH in the U.S.
Exactly. The INSERM is called. Yes.
Nice. And what did you do there?
I continued. It was the same. I ended up in the same lab where I did my PhD, so I continued that same research. Yeah, and then when I got hired as a faculty member, I went to the same lab I did a postdoc. So I kind of ping pong back and forth until I moved here to Texas.
Yeah.
I was a very proud single woman, but I ended up meeting my now husband, but at the time, and so we both found a job here.
Nice. And what do I say? So in some sense, I might be off on the exact year number, but you've kind of been researching addiction for maybe 25 years or so?
Something like that. Pretty much most of my life, yes. I would say since 1992. So I don't know how many years ago that is. Yes.
Yeah. And when you're researching addiction, I don't think you're an addict per se, right? So I guess what has been, maybe a bit of your journey as far as personal familiarity to addiction along the way here? You mentioned that, your mentor had alcohol use disorder, which he passed away from.
I think it happened by chance that I got into it, but I did on the way meet a lot of people, including one of my former partners who died of heroin overdose.
Sure.
And that was right before I went to France. I had already chosen to go there, but it just so happened. And other friends and possibly relatives as well. And I think whenever I'm presented with a problem, I like to solve it. So I was in that field and I wanted to solve it. Not that I solved addiction, but I wanted to solve different questions. And so I just continued in that. This said, I'm someone who tries to see the human condition in everything, and I tend to empathize with people who suffer from different things, and addiction is something that I can really empathize with, because I see how much their intentions get thrown out the window a lot of times.
For sure. I mean, I think the thing is, I can speak as an addict myself, and I can only speak for myself, but the further an addiction goes, as it progresses and the consequences get bigger, you can see, like, quote unquote, the good in the person, right?
Yes.
And some things that are still really intact and beautiful and pure, right? But it's like the person themselves, they can't reliably get access to those things, right? They're muddled in preoccupation with a substance, or trying to not let people in that this is going on, or whatever they need to do to get their substance. And so they essentially get taken away from themselves, but you can see that in someone that's struggling with it. And I think and I that's think, hard.
Unfortunately, you see different types, and the ones that a lot of people end up seeing in the clinic are those who seek help.
Yeah.
And they're a very biased sample, because there's some that are very difficult to help that will never end up in the clinic.
For sure.
They are living homeless under the bridge. And
my times in treatment, for sure, that was always something that was communicated to us to varying effect. But most people struggling with addiction, they never take or get that full opportunity to pretty much just do a reset and get educated about what they're dealing with, right? And so to be unfortunate enough to maybe deal with addiction, but fortunate enough to be able to, one way or another, to get help, or be willing to get help, right? And so there's definitely privilege there, and the opportunity to really try and escape addiction. So you end up in Texas. What's kind of the story there? Because I think you were it was a university in Chicago area.
Yes, it's
for a long
Rosalind
time.
Franklin University, the Chicago Medical School, and it was where my husband and I both found a job together here.
Yeah.
So he came and was one of the people who started the medical school here.
Okay.
And I came as a spousal trailing hire.
A plus one.
A plus one,
Yeah.
yes. Although I like to imagine that, I still did interview and everything, and got my own position.
Yeah. I guess in your time studying addiction, right? The nature of science and human knowledge is we tend to learn more as time goes on. So I'm curious about, what do you think are some of the biggest perspective or understanding changes that have happened in the field of addiction during your time? And that's a broad scope. But
yeah, I'm not so sure. I think some of the things is this going back and forth between, is it a brain disease or is it a will disease?
Yeah.
And neither are correct, perhaps, and how much the environment plays a role, genetics plays a role. It's all, I think we have to not simplistically view it as one or the other.
Yeah.
Also, I remember giving a talk once to a lay public who really still believed that it was a willpower. And so I remember really pushing the other way around. Look, these people have no choice at this point,
Yeah.
et cetera, et cetera. And at the end, someone came to talk to me and said, Mickey, if I thought it was not a choice, I would have never stopped. I need some agency in my life. And you saying it's completely a brain disease doesn't give me any agency. So, and I had never thought of it that way, right? So,
Yeah.
I
mean, there are implications, right, on the stance of, human free will. I think there's the standard or operational sense, that most people think that they have free will, right, entire agency over what they're doing, right? But, right, we have neuroscience evidence, right, I think it's brain scans and stuff, that even before you think a thought or do a thing, right, it's already
Yes.
occurring prior to you being aware of it.
Exactly.
Right, and so that's not something particularly, under a person's control. If the thought is happening
That's
before you're
scary,
aware of
isn't
it,
right?
How
You
free,
can predict what someone is thinking before they are aware of it
how
themselves.
free are you,
Exactly.
right? If that's the case, and I don't know. I mean, I'm aware objectively of the idea of free will, that we're actually probably much less free than we walk
like
around the
to
world
imagine.
with. But I also think at the same time, walking around the world with thinking that I have complete agency over my choices, right? I think that's a healthy way to live, right?
I agree.
Healthier
Otherwise,
than thinking I'm somehow, not
yes,
entirely
otherwise
responsible.
you don't do anything, right? You don't
Yeah.
try to improve yourself or change where you need to.
Yeah, and it is interesting, addiction, how much of it is will, how much of it is a brain disease, right? It's definitely a disease in the sense of an organ undergoes its semi-irreversible changes given the severity of the disease, right?
And some might argue it's societal as well, right? And what certain norms and expectations and pressures, and so it's so much more complex than one or the other, I think.
Yeah, I guess where do you land specifically, or what are some of your biggest issues with how it's framed?
Unfortunately, I'm not sure I have a good answer, except I
It's
tend
hard.
to counteract whatever the other person is saying to have them see the other sides as well.
Yeah.
So I think my point is to try to embrace several aspects and not think it's one or the other.
Yeah. I think, yeah, I mean, psychiatric diagnoses in general, too, we have these boxes of labels, right? Someone's depressed, someone's anxious, someone has
Yeah.
PTSD. And although useful, right, based on symptoms that people present with, the underlying biology, we don't exactly know where the demarcations are. I would
There's
imagine
so much overlap, exactly. And
between those illnesses, I would imagine the biology is probably much more similar amongst them than we would
Right.
expect.
So the label is useful so that you can get services. Let's
Yeah.
put it that way.
Yeah.
But otherwise, it might not be.
Yeah, I kind of imagine that there are buckets long term that we'll do away with. There will be different buckets, but
Yeah.
I think it will be more
But
objectively
I must say
based.
again, I'm not a clinician, so
Yeah, neither am I.
I can study rats and I can tell you why they take drugs, but not necessarily humans. Although I have very strong feelings, having lived with humans that have different. That they comes from different walks of life, and being at a university, you tend to see only one type of walk from life.
Yeah,
I mean, they're
it's
all
pretty well selected for
very
it here.
selected and
Yeah.
biased sample. But if you go here in Austin under I-35 and help homeless people, they're very, very different.
Yeah.
And they still have addiction, but it looks very, very different
For
between
sure.
them and the ones that are here.
Yeah. When I say the
And-
ability to get them to be functional members of
Yes.
society again is very
It's
different
very
than someone
different.
that
And then I
perhaps is
know
struggling
I'm
here.
part of some parent support groups that they have their kids that will not get out of bed in the morning
Yeah.
unless they can take some drug that will relieve their anxiety because they cannot function otherwise.
Yeah.
And that's yet another thing. And they don't go to the doctor because they can't. They don't. So there may be people that some clinicians might not ever see.
For sure. Probably most
Yeah.
people. Yeah.
Yes. There are some that are court mandated, so you end up seeing them.
Yeah.
Or I was talking to someone who worked in the VA, and so they're mandated to go to treatment, some
Yeah.
of them. But again, it's rare to have people who are going to a treatment because they don't want to be there, you know, other than these court
Yeah. I mean, it
mandated
happens
ones.
like if someone, you know,
Is involved with the law.
with the law, or like I can give an example. This is kind of an exotic example, but I had a friend in treatment once, and she showed up and she was like, I don't think I have a problem, but like 20 of my extended family members all sat me down and were like,
Yes.
you're going
They
to
did an
treatment,
intervention.
and,
Yes.
or we're not talking to you again. So she's like, so I'm here, right? And
Right.
so those types of things also happen where people kind of
Yes.
get, you know, their arm twisted into doing it. But
Yeah.
was there ever a time, maybe before you studied addiction, where you viewed it as a choice? I can say that when I was when I was younger, for sure, I was like, how could anyone be stupid enough to like continue making that choice? I was a lot younger, but
Maybe in high school, I remember we had this, in high school in Italy, it's different than high school here. So we had these week-long or 3-day-long trips to different cities. And in Italy, they don't control alcohol, at least at the time. And so it was very common that some people went out and got drunk and threw up, etc. And I remember people feeling sorry for them. And I remember telling myself, I don't feel sorry for them. They knew what they were doing. So
Yeah.
maybe in that moment, I felt that it was a thing of will, but it wasn't addiction. It was just experimenting. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
No, just curious. And so one thing that you do that is atypical, perhaps, if someone just, you know, not just, but, you know, studying neuroscience and doing, you know, animal work is you have a course here.
Yes.
I think it's called Analytical Skepticism.
Yes. My husband found that name for the course, which suits it very well. And it mostly about how to do and consume science well.
Yeah. Do you want to, I guess, kind of walk us through how this course came to be, and also what was the impetus? You know,
So
what
was
has
the
really driven
impetus?
you?
So I've always had, you know how there are different personality disorders.
I'm
cluster
familiar.
A, cluster B, and cluster C. So I happen to have one that's in cluster C, which is obsessive compulsive personality disorder. Not the same thing as obsessive compulsive disorder.
OCPD, right?
OCPD.
Yeah.
And in that one, when you see things wrong, you really suffer. And in fact, you make other people suffer because you really want to right a wrong, right? Yeah. And I have had this all along. My first words in Italian was, I don't believe it, you know, when people told me stuff. And so I think I've always had this wanting to see the truth.
Yeah.
And when I was in Chicago, in the Chicago area, I was teaching a very simple course on statistics. And because of that, people were sending me their data to see, did I analyze it correctly or not?
Yep.
And every time I saw the data, I saw mistakes in the data. And
Yeah.
I said, my goodness, if there are mistakes that you produce and no one notices them, they might end up being in published literature,
Right.
because you guys aren't doing things correctly. So I started to create a course in how to do things.
I mean, it's a type of
correctly.
misinformation, right?
It's a type of misinformation, but some of it is unconscious. I mean, just you don't even know. It's ignorance, you know,
Yeah.
or just careless mistakes. And
For
so
sure.
I started creating a course to put these barriers to, you know, foolproof yourself in
Yeah.
making these mistakes. And one of them, which might be related more to addiction, is these cognitive biases that we have, where we have the illusion of thinking that we know why we're choosing a certain things, but we're really don't know why we're choosing
Yeah,
it.
like we've convinced ourselves that this is the reason why we're doing
That is the
this,
reason, right?
Yeah.
We rationalize, or we unconsciously make a decision without knowing why we make it, or we remember certain things a certain way,
Yeah.
but it's totally not the case. And that can impact scientific experiments a lot, which is why I discuss them in the course. But it could also be very common with addiction, where someone will lie to themselves about the severity of a situation.
Yeah, I
or
mean,
why
I think
they're
it's
taking
definitely
things,
a
or-
hallmark of the disease. Of,
Exactly.
You know, I need to take this because I, you know, need to feel a certain way for a certain experience, or I
or-
have so much to get done, or like I need to
Yeah,
sleep.
I only
can't
had, 6 doses today when you've had, many more,
Yeah,
or only
yeah.
once, or, oh, it's fine, I've only taken one, I will only take one in the morning when I wake up, and then that's it. And then, how's it going for you? Yeah, good. But you don't admit it to yourself.
Yeah.
And, it's kind of a problem. Or you say, it's all right, tomorrow I'll stop, but today.
Yeah.
But
we'll push
tomorrow-
that problem
we'll push
till tomorrow.
that later,
Yeah.
thinking that tomorrow you can do something.
Yeah, I think also convincing, like for me, the number of times that I tried to stop just by me alone, right?
Yeah.
And I would be like, this will be the time I'll get it, right?
Yes,
and
yes,
it
yes.
just never.
Who was it? I
The
think-
evidence never backed up that this was
Never
going to
and
work
yet
out
you
for me.
still
Yeah,
somehow
I would
tell
convince
yourself
myself. Yeah.
What was it? I think Churchill said quitting smoking is easy. I've done it many times. Right.
Yeah, he liked whiskey and smoking. And,
Right.
Yeah, I mean
I don't know if it was him, but that's
to each their own. As far as teaching, this idea, I say that when you see information, you need to be careful, right?
Yes.
Of thinking like, where is this coming from? How is this presented? And just generally how to make sense of that. How do you go about informing a group of people about how to assess information? Like, where do you begin?
It's so difficult nowadays. We get bombarded with information, and you can find whatever you want to prove your point.
Yeah.
If you want to prove your point, I don't know, brushing teeth is bad for you, you will find enough evidence
For
to
sure.
do that. So
There's
you
a
can-
study for everything.
There's a
right?
study for everything, and so having a preconceived notion of, as I say in the course, you see what you're looking for.
Yeah.
And you
We're very
actually-
good at that,
yes,
for
and you
sure.
seek it out too.
Yeah. It's
and-
it's the same phenomenon, right? Of like, I don't know, let's say you come across a movie that you didn't know existed, right? And then all of a sudden you're like seeing that poster everywhere, right?
That's
It's
another
because
example.
now I'm noticing
Now I
this,
notice
right?
you have a broken arm. Now everybody has a broken arm, right?
Yeah.
That's one thing. Or in the case of science, you want to prove that something exists, so you look for everything that will point you in that direction.
Yeah, you want to validate what you already believe, right?
Well, you validate what you already
Feels
believe. So
good,
one way
yeah.
to go about it, and I try to do in the course, is to actually try to disprove what you believe. And if you try to go about it that way, can you find enough information about it? And now can you put it in a table, really the pros and cons of each one, and actually count them and analyze if there's a statistical difference between those that say yes and those that say no. Because
Sure.
otherwise you'll only believe those that say yes, or only those that say no.
Yeah.
Or say, you know what, there are 10 that say no, but they're flawed. And
right.
so it's
somehow you can just do
Just-
away with them. right?
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
There was a very interesting study about the death penalty, where they showed the same information to people who were either for or against the death penalty.
Yeah.
And one piece of information, there were 2 pieces of information. One pointed to the direction that the death penalty reduces violent crimes, and one pointed towards that it doesn't reduce violent crimes.
Yep.
And both of them just believed the one that
For sure.
met their already
yeah.
existing belief,
Yeah.
except it was the same. So.
It is wild. I mean, I'm sure this is going on with me as well. I think it's like a very easy thing to slip into, right?
Absolutely.
And trying to figure out, where are my blind spots, right? And to be
It's
able to
very
challenge
hard,
yourself.
and then we don't
it's,
believe
it's a lot
that
of
we
work,
have
too.
them. Other people have them, but
Yeah, not us.
We don't have them exactly. So that's one thing that I try to do with the course that I think could be extrapolatable to life, really.
Yeah, I mean, there's much more out there than just, charts and figures and scientific information. There's lots of
Yes.
information to look
I
through.
also think it's really hard nowadays because a lot of us are on social media, and the social media keeps sending you things that match an algorithm of things they think that you will like. So if you believe that strawberries are green, you will have a lot of social media things
Yeah.
that will point in that direction.
Or
and you might
it's getting
not
pretty good as
ever
far as
see-
even prediction too. Like sometimes
Exactly.
I'll be like starting to think about something and I start getting ads, but it's like I haven't texted about it. I
Can
haven't
you
like
believe
talked
that?
about it. And it's like I'm sure it's some
Yes.
algorithm that's able to kind
And
of
now
predict
with
what I might be up
ChatGPT
to.
or
but-
other large language models, they know what you want to hear.
Oh, yeah.
And they point you in that
very
direction.
very
I said,
sycophantic, right?
I know,
yeah.
it's amazing.
It's getting
So-
better, but yeah. Yeah. So analytical skepticism, we've covered that a bit. I guess if you were to look back at your own work now teaching, I think what you described as a very rigorous course of analytical skepticism. Do you think your work would hold up to your current standards?
I don't know, some of it, but not all of it. In fact, in one of the flawed studies that I showed them, this is an example. I bring up one of my own examples as well. So definitely, and
what is the example?
oh, it's a study where I correlated levels of stress hormones with behavioral response to drugs.
Sure.
And the higher the stress levels they were, the higher the response to the drugs, because the more stressed you are, the more you respond to the drug. But the way they were done were in aggregates, averages of each experimental group, and you're not supposed to assume individual behavior based on averages. Yes, and so the relationship still held true even if you disaggregate them, but it shouldn't have been plotted that way.
I see. Yes. Do you want to? I think people might find this interesting. So let's say you want to study the levels of stress hormones,
yes,
right? And you're working in animal models. Would you be able to just walk us through, like, how do you actually do that?
Yes. So humans have the prototypical stress hormone is cortisol in humans, and the rats have corticosterone. It's the same thing. They're part of glucocorticoid hormones that are secreted by the adrenal gland. And so you can simply stress an animal in a way that's could be useful for the human population, analogous. It's not always possible to do exactly the same thing, but one of it could be make it a scarcity of food, like humans can have it. So you can reduce the amount of food they have, still give them enough that they're fed, but it's more difficult for them to find it.
Yep.
That's one of it, or they have a little bit less of it. Another one is social isolation. A lot of people with addiction are socially isolated, and if you socially isolate a rat, you will exacerbate the addiction
for sure.
too. There are other ones which are social stressors. If you are socially defeated, you're in an environment where you put a resident rat that lives in their cage and they're the king of the cage, and you put an intruder in it, the resident rat will attack the intruder.
Sure.
And that's very similar to the extent that you can make a comparison to what could happen as you join a new work environment where everybody's...
You got a coworker you don't like, right? Yeah.
Exactly. So you can create these situations in rats as well. For sure. You could also completely have them stress-free, but inject stress hormones in them. So you will...
So exogenously,
exactly,
you would take, their analog to cortisol, inject them with it. Right?
Exactly.
And then how do you, let's say you do stress a rat out by, not giving it enough food or socially isolating it, like what happens from there? How do you actually measure the amount of stress or cortisol?
So you take the blood and measure the amount that's in the blood.
Sure.
And then you can also measure some behavioral response that's attached to it. Or in our case, we could study addiction, that's the response to addiction. Yeah. So you could study that.
I was wondering... So I think there's a high responder and low responder.
Yeah, that was
model.
Created by my former mentor in France, who's Italian. Pier Vincenzo Piazza is his name. The HRLR rat, and in France we used to call him HRLR, HRLR. So anyway, so the high responder rats and the low responder rats get elevated after a stressor, similar amount, but the high responder rats, the levels of stress hormones remain elevated for longer.
So they both get stressed an equal amount, but the high responders, they stay stressed.
Yes,
right?
A little bit longer, and I don't fully remember if it's exactly the same amount, but the time to return to readapt to compensate for this dysregulation is different.
And that stress, like what is the relationship there as far as propensity for addiction and stuff like that?
It's striking. I mean, it's striking. We don't want to think of it, but it both promotes addiction.
Yeah.
And if you were previously addicted, it triggers relapse.
For sure.
It's a no-brainer. It happens all the time.
Yeah, that's definitely something I can speak to is there was me before I ever was an addict, right? From ages 1 till 16, right? 17 is when I, first ever got into stimulants. And ever since I ran into like full-blown addiction, although I'm sober now, I am much more sensitive to stress.
Yes.
The way that it will,
Yes.
get me out of line. Like I have to rely on like routine and structure much more than I ever did before I ran into addiction, for sure, just to like keep myself out of that
Yes.
stress zone.
It's extremely powerful. I did a study that's not published yet, and I really should publish it because it's been
Sneak
done
peek.
a long time.
Yeah.
But my OCPD is preventing me because it has to be right perfect
It's
before I
perfect.
do it.
Yeah.
Where we looked at the electrical activity of dopamine neurons in the brain, and these neurons fire in action potentials. They go tum tum tum. They have
So
a
whenever-
certain rhythm.
Whenever one neuron, talks to another or signals, right, we can detect the
impulse,
electricity
the
that's
electricity
occurring,
gets,
right?
Yes. And so these dopamine neurons have a certain level of activity, and when
Is this in the VTA?
it's in the ventral tegmental area, the midbrain. So they're the midbrain as where the dopamine neurons reside are the ventral tegmental area, and right lateral to it the substantia nigra pars compacta, which is the part that gets where the dopamine cell bodies degenerate in Parkinson's disease.
That's what I was going to say. There's kind of two big dopamine hubs, so to speak, in the brain. If I'm correct?
There are many actually,
there are
but
many.
the ones for addiction and movement are in the A10 pathway is the VTA, and the A9 pathway is the substantia nigra.
Gotcha.
Right next to it, but and they classified them A, B, C. The neurons at the time A were the catecholamine neurons, and B I think was.
Yeah.
So that's
My
just
degree's in
yeah.
chemistry. I have a little neuroscience
Yeah.
exposure, so I know
Anyway,
some
so
things.
that's why it's called
but
A. And so I suppose if it's A10, it means that this being a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But anyway, but there are several where the dopamine neurons are more than just a couple. And these neurons, when you stress a rat, they increase their firing. If you just slightly stress a rat, they won't increase their firing. So we did a study showing that if you remove food for 24 hours,
Yep.
they elevate their firing and then they relapse, right?
Yeah.
But if you remove the food for only 18 hours or 16 hours in a naive rat, they don't elevate their firing. But if they were previously exposed to drugs, it does elevate their firing.
I see. So
it means the same stressor does nothing in one individual,
Yep.
but it does in a drug-exposed individual. And after 10 days of being exposed to drugs, so it still does it.
Yeah, so let me just make sure I understand this. So you have rats that don't have prior drug experience.
Yes.
And then you have, are they, I say, like genetic isotype, like same?
They're outbred rats, but they're litter mates, let's call it that
Okay.
way, yes.
So they're very like similar as far
Yes.
as like how they grew up, what their
Yes.
genetic profile might be. So you have these two sets of rats, ones that have never had drug experience, then you have the set of rats that did have prior drug experience. And it didn't even have to be that long, right? And then you give them both the same stressor, and they have very different responses.
Exactly.
Wherein the drug-exposed rat, even if not using it at this time, right, not using drugs, has a much more severe stress response.
Exactly. They're sensitive to lesser stressors. So
Yeah.
a stress that wouldn't do nothing to a normal rat will
Yeah.
elevate dopamine in the other. So I think it's important because I find myself criticizing those that respond a lot to stress. But this is nothing. I live it every day. Yes,
Yeah.
sure. But you're different, right? And for you, it does nothing. But try to have a formerly addicted brain. It will respond much more. So,
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's also indicative of like there are days where I could sit in traffic and be totally at peace and be like, this isn't like stressing me out. It's totally fine. Then there are days, right,
Exactly.
where whatever's going on with me,
Yes.
I can't take traffic today, right? I'm like annoyed by it and frustrated, and just that difference though, just based on whatever was going on with me. So there's that high responder, low responder model, and then one thing I think you've done a lot of research on is that adolescent brains, however they work,
Yes.
are much more susceptible to addiction
Yes.
than a mature brain or an older person. And so I was wondering if you could unpack a bit for us, kind of what you've been able to find out there, or what you understand over the course of your career, and like the mechanics of it?
Yeah, and it's another time when rats are useful, because in humans, adolescents have much more opportunity to be exposed to drugs than adults. I mean, it's not common that you go to a workplace and they have drugs lying all over the table, but in adolescent worlds it's much more common, so you have more opportunity to get into drugs as an adolescent. And so you wonder, are they just taking it because it's there for them, or are they inherently more vulnerable to it? And so with rats, you can give them equal opportunity, right? And when you do that, you'll see that adolescents just take off with it, and adults don't. And another very interesting finding is that adolescents will work for it much harder than adults. Adults say, it's too hard to work, I'll give up. But the adolescents, no, I'm going to keep going. And even more fascinating is that if you pair drug taking with punishment, as it could happen in society, you get dinged, right? Adolescents say,
you get a DUI, spend like 2 nights in jail, right?
Exactly. Your spouse leaves you or what have you. When you model that in the rat by punishing drug use, the adults say, well, when you punish drug use, everybody stops in the moment. But then the key thing is, did this teach you a lesson or not, right? And so the next day, adults say, okay, I'm not doing this again. But adolescents, like, either they forgot, they don't care, I don't know what, but they go right back at it, as if they had never been punished.
We'll come back to this in just a sec, but one thing, I mean, I can definitely say, if you were to map that onto humans, and I guess I'll use myself, I could say a rat, but maybe a guinea pig is a more common term. Over the years, what I've figured out, right, I've been to treatment and all that, and you have bottoms, right? And every bottom I've ever had, you're always like, I will learn the lesson this time. This is low enough. I don't need any more of this. But there's something about, and like in other areas of my life where I've made mistakes, right, I do learn the lessons, right? But in this particular area, when it comes to a substance, it's not, the bottom is incredibly painful, but something goes on mechanically where, given enough time, no bottom is low enough for me to be able to remember the pain. It's like the pain of the last bottom goes away and I forget almost, right?
Yes, and I don't know why that is, but it is a fact, I suppose.
For sure.
I once heard an analogy that if women remembered how painful their giving birth would be, they wouldn't have other children.
That's probably
right?
true. I know there's like the general phenomena of euphoric recall, but there's something else, I don't know what it is, but where, like, sitting here today, right, I'm sober, and I can think of my last bottom, and objectively I can be like, that was really bad. I don't remember the pain, though. Like, that's not why I'm sober today. I'm sober today. Like, what has kept me sober is that I've been able to, construct a life where I feel like actual contentment like this. Like, I want to live my life the way it is right now.
And you don't want anything to throw a wrench in this thing that you've constructed.
It's not this, like, feeling, like, objectively, I know if I were to go and use again, it would be bad.
Yeah.
Right. But it's not the fear of that's keeping me sober at this point.
And it's really important because a lot of times, despite, I don't know how many people are aware of what you just said, which I think is really important. It's not the memory of the pain.
Yeah, that doesn't keep you sober.
Away, but that's what we do. We do fear-based interventions, If you do this, this will happen. And first of all, there's denial, and then it says, I don't care. And then even if I did, I don't quite grasp it.
Yeah.
And I don't know why that is the case. A lot of people have gone away from fear-based intervention, done motivational interviewing and other things that try to make you view where you want to be and what you need in order to get there to some extent, and have you reason yourself through why you are choosing this better path rather than a worse one. So
it's one of the biggest differentiators in terms of people's ability to stay sober long term is when they're getting going on it, right? And it's pretty rough in the beginning, whatever you're coming off of. Obviously, it varies, right? Addiction is a spectrum, and it's also a progressive thing based on what we understand. But yeah, one of the best long-term predictors for poor prognostication for people to be able to stay sober is, do they have like a long-term, like, kind of idea of where they're trying to go, right? And if they do, right, it results in improved outcomes generally. Going back though to like, so there was a paper I think that you were involved with publishing in 2014, and I forget the exact title. At the same time, my addiction to stimulants was just beginning. So it's bizarre for me to think that you were
At the time, yeah.
right at the same time that mine was just beginning. Right, you were doing work publishing on. I think it was something about like cocaine usage in teenagers is.
Yes.
What do I say? Are teenagers more likely to develop a
yes,
cocaine
this is-
addiction, something like that in
Yeah.
academic terms. And my thing wasn't cocaine; it was ADHD prescribed
Which is very similar.
stimulants. But yeah, that's just they're pretty much the same thing as far as like if you just depending on the amount you take,
Yeah.
right? And so it is just stepping back. Like that's very I don't know if profound's the right word, but interesting to me that you were publishing from in academia, and this is just beginning for me. And
You were living it.
I was living it. And when I think about that, I think your work shows, right, that stress, results in increased likelihood of someone becoming addicted to something
Yes.
given the opportunity. And I can think like, yes, growing up, like ages 1 to 16, home life was good, never any insecurity about food or living or
And
feeling
despite
loved,
that,
right?
You
And it was
ended
when I
up-
was 17, right at that time, right, we started having some stress in our home, right? And I didn't think it impacted me because you're like 17, you're like, I'm my own person, I'm fine, I don't need my parents, right? But it was when this kind of stress though came into my life that is exactly when I first found
Really?
a substance,
Wow.
right, to start using in a way I'd never used before. And I didn't put that together at the time. I thought I just was using it because I think you mentioned the idea of enhancement. I was like, this makes me, more happy, more motivated, more kind. I don't need as much sleep, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
But
There's so many, well, maybe not so many, but there are different motives why people start
yeah,
to begin with, but you can definitely exacerbate one or push one further with stress.
and it's interesting too. So I'm from a family of 6 kids. We're all very close in age, right? The first 3 were out of the house when we started having some home stress. I was still at home, right? And I'm also a twin, so I have a twin brother, right? And given the same stimulus of what was going on in our home, we also have a younger brother as well, so there's 3 of us still in the home. Given the same stimulus of what was going on in our home, I'm the only one that ended up with an addiction of
Right.
those 3.
They coped in a different manner.
Yeah, but yeah, just like unpacking, why would one of us end up with it but not the other? It's not that they didn't ever try anything, right? And
Your twin is identical twin?
fraternal.
Fraternal, yeah. But still, I mean, I've known of people that are identical twins and one has an addiction
Right.
and one doesn't. It's not 100% genetic,
Why
obviously.
is the hook grab one and not the other?
Right, yeah. And you never know. And sometimes you don't even need the stressor to begin, but definitely
For sure.
if you get addicted, at least what we showed in
At least a visible
in
stressor,
rats,
like I would
right.
say, not always, but the majority of people that struggle with addiction that I've, encountered over the years, which is many, even if they didn't have an exact like stress kind of coming down on them as a kid, they had it in the sense that they felt different than other people,
I
right?
know.
They had this sense of otherness that
I know.
something's not
So
quite
that's a
whole
really
in me,
important
right?
aspect. And shame is a very strong driver of coping in ways that
Yeah.
have to do with drugs and feeling different. Yet another sense of belonging. And of course, as soon as someone's addicted, we isolate them, right? We don't,
Right.
and it makes it worse, but
Yeah.
you don't want to also make them live with others because it might impact others. Who knows?
Right.
In some countries, they're doing social prescribing as a treatment.
What is that?
It means just putting them in a communal setting so that they have human connection. Because
Oh,
a
yeah.
lot of those that goes away.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's that notion, right? The opposite of addiction isn't sobriety, right? Being abstinent is one thing, right?
Yes.
The opposite of addiction, though, is feeling connected, right? It's connection.
Exactly.
That you're plugged into something that's, bigger than yourself in some sense, right? That
Yeah, and the
that
more rich your
fills
life,
this hole you've always felt,
exactly.
right?
I'm very much someone who appreciates the different motives that I think Marcia Cooper first brought up about drinking, and I view it a lot. It happened. I was having to give a lecture on addiction that was building on a prior lecture on operant conditioning, which I'm not a fan of. But I want
what is operate?
Like a Skinner, that if you give something that you add something that has a positive outcome, you will do that thing again. Like if you pair a sound with something positive, or you will.
Right, you can build that like habit, right, where they have that expectation because it's tied to something good.
Yes, or you expect that a certain thing will lead a certain events, and so there's positive, meaning something that you add, and so if something you add is pleasurable, you will do that behavior again, and if it's negative, you will stop that. So it's positive punishment, meaning you punish someone for doing something bad, they will not do that thing again. You give them a reward, they will do it again. And the other way is negative. So negative, you will take away something good, so they will stop doing something, or you will take away something bad, so you will do something more of. And I am not a fan of that model, because I feel that you are adding value to things that should inherently have a value. So if you reward something that inherently should be rewarding, you're removing the value of that inherentness to it by adding an external one. For example, if a child does service to the community, that by itself should be rewarding. But if you reward them by giving them a treat or a prize,
paying them on the
side, now the payment becomes the main thing.
Like the
and
focus,
now the value of doing it inherently decreases. So there's a very interesting book by Alfie Kohn called Punished by Rewards that discusses some of these aspects. Or if you praise a child for drawing a beautiful butterfly, now the child will always draw that butterfly and will no longer expand to other things. And I'm probably not portraying it quite the right way. But anyway, so I'm not for rewarding things that inherently should have a natural endogenous.
Like just like good be good.
But I wanted to pair it with what the prior lecturer had said about Pavlovian conditioning and Skinner and all these things.
The classics,
the classics.
Can we reproduce them?
So I tried to do that, and I realized that addiction can fit this model, but it doesn't, in that we are not sensitive to these negative things that you do in order to decrease the behavior. And so, but we still try to do them, to try to modify, okay? So I'm going to give you something good if you stop, or I'm going to take away something good if you stop, or I'm going to give you something bad if you don't stop, or I'm going to take away something good. And to some extent, for some people, it might work, a contingency management, where you give a reward if they are able to remain drug-free for a certain period of time. But I think that mostly works for people who are enhancement seekers, right? But for people who maybe started drugs, or at least in the beginning, to avoid a horrible void that they have inside, they can't get out of bed. So there's
the problem is
inside, and there's no reward you can give them. You can ask some of these people that I know, I'll give you this if, and say, I don't care about anything. You give me $1 million, I don't care. I just
don't feel good.
I don't feel good. I would just want the pain to go away. And so I think it's important to also look at that. And again, the people who might end up seeking treatment might not always be the ones that are avoiding, because they are avoiding even getting out of the house sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I think treatment-wise too. So the first time I ever went to treatment, I was 19, and I got there and I learned a lot. I learned I wasn't that unique in what I was dealing with. That was probably the most important takeaway for me. But when you're in treatment, there are people that are kind of like leaders on your unit, and people that clearly don't want to be there and are just trying to buck the rules and stuff. But so you think you have a sense of like, this person's going to stay sober, this person's not, right? Absolutely,
Really?
just no predictability.
Wow.
I've seen people that I thought had no shot at staying sober, and I show up at a meeting or something years later, and there they are, and they're like a completely different person. It's the most amazing.
How did you do it? Right.
It's the most amazing thing. I'm like, I was just not expecting this, right? And then at the same time, I've seen people that seem to have a good attitude and were there for the right reasons, and it didn't work out.
It didn't help, right? Yeah, I know. So. I know it's very sad, and I don't know. And again, I'm not a clinician. I'm just telling you this by anecdotal experience I've had with people. Yes. But I think it's fascinating, though, that even though we know that punishment doesn't work and stress makes things bad. We punish, which if you think of it,
We still
punishment
do.
is a stress.
Oh, yeah.
So it makes no sense. And I remember talking to some parents about this, and they said, okay, but it's not punishment. What then? We have to, maybe if you punish them over and over and over, they will finally open their eyes. The fact is, no, but even the best of us, even those who know that this doesn't work, it's the default method, because this way of operant conditioning that I've described, where you add something, you'll do it more, it works for some brains and it works for our brains, but not for those. And we function with our brains thinking we can apply it on theirs.
I think the thing is with addiction is like you want to apply logic and rationality,
Exactly.
but it's not
Exactly.
it doesn't abide by that.
I know.
It's an irrational,
Yes.
beast that.
And with someone with OCPD, it's a terrible thing.
Oh,
Because
that would be a terrible.
Can't you see it?
That would be a terrible conundrum. If like I'm trying to fully rationalize and understand this thing and digest it,
Saying,
but it's
look,
just.
it's so obvious. It's there. Can't you see it?
Yeah.
You can't see it. Why can't you see it?
Yeah. Have you ever wished that you were able to experience like what an addiction was? Not keep it, but at least like understand, what that internal experience might be like?
I don't know. I don't like losing control of the situation.
Yeah, it's not a good feeling.
It's not a good feeling. And so I'm not sure I really want to do that. I have experiences in life where I do not have control of the situation, and it's a very uncomfortable feeling. And you scramble to try to find some semblance of it in very maladaptive ways. And so even though it might not be addiction related, I feel I have that inability to function in certain scenarios.
It's like, it's kind of paralyzing in a sense
it
of
is,
like,
right.
I can't get my arms around this thing.
And
right?
there are other aspects that I have that maybe are common in other people as well that throw me off and make me totally non-functional in certain settings.
Sure.
And so I don't know, I think I'm okay with those rather than
Mickey will stay Mickey.
Yeah,
No, just curious.
I remember I once had a minor surgery, and they gave me a mild anesthetic, and at the end of it, they told me we should not have given it to you because you wanted to be so aware of what was going on, and you couldn't be, and you had no.
We're gonna blot you out.
Yeah, and we made a mistake to give you the anesthetic. We should have let you, feel it all.
That's funny.
Yeah.
One question I have. I mean, there's many questions I could go down. Of all the people that could be, sitting here having devoted 25 years to studying addiction, what do you think it is about you that's been, that has led you to being able to do that? That's a long time to study one thing, and it also, being an accomplished academic, you not only do you have to, probably be good at the work you're doing, but it's a story of resiliency in some sense. That
or OCPD that never lets you let go of what you're doing, and you keep
fair.
doing it over and over, and you cling on to it. So maybe that. But to be honest, in our field, a lot of people stay in the same domain for a long time, and they just keep finding something new. So it's always interesting.
Yeah.
And it's quite common. In my case, maybe in my case, I might fixate on a few things. So I might remain very close to home, I'd say, and that's really my personality. I remember when I was a child, I used to draw the Pink Panther from the front, from the side, from the back, from the top, from the underneath, all angles. And
just
that's
thinking it through,
it through, and that's how I am. So I like to really bring it through. And
this is just a ubiquitous feature of you throughout your life.
Yes, I've always had it. I mean, I was drinking the Pink Panther. I was drawing it at 6, 7, 8 years old. So I've always had this aspect of really wanting to be thorough about things.
It just matured and developed into a career. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Other people are maybe they lose sight of something and want to shift on something else, and maybe I am doing it now with my sort of cognitive biases that I really admire, and errors in science.
Moving from, but neuroscience research versus this idea of like analytical skepticism.
Yes,
right?
exactly. So I am expanding in that direction, perhaps. But otherwise, I think it's relatively common that we stay on. And then for what's unique of me, I'm not sure much is unique with me, but I do feel that I've always valued humans and try to never lose sight of what the human things are. And I remember being at a meeting once where someone had found something and someone else had found something quite different, and they were debating because they were using DBA mice, a type of mouse, and they were using C57 mice. And so, I stepped back and said, but look, if you can't even agree on which mouse, which is the truth, how do we even go further up? It says, oh, well, the humans, like, but no, that's the whole point, is to help humans, right? I don't want to treat a mouse. I want to treat a human. And so I think I always really try to stick to what is our ultimate goal. And it's tricky because in science, to find things, you get very reductionistic. And it's always important to try to maintain contact with humans who have a condition to know what's more interesting to study. I'll give you another example. A lot of people are doing research on autism, and a lot of people that are doing that research are fixated that their social issues are the main ones, but they're not necessarily. If you talk to someone who is autistic, and they go by identity first, so autistic, they are often overwhelmed by sound, noises, touch, etc.
Like hyper-excitable, right?
Exactly. And so why are we looking at how they are interacting as the main key finding? Or someone with spinal cord injury, they have bladder issues and incontinence. That's a big problem, but you might not think of it. You might think, oh, they need to have fine motor control of their hands.
It's a second order effect of some
Yes,
sort.
right. And so knowing what people really want is useful.
Keeping that,
Yeah, and I'm also actually part of this council that's called the PIME Council, and so it's a organization for people with mental health issues. It's I can't remember the acronym what it's for.
That's right.
But it's advocacy for people with mental health issues, where and being in that really where we do not what is best for the person, but what the person feels is best for them. It really makes you see that humans, you need to know what humans want for themselves, and it's not always what you think it is.
I think research-wise too, it's easy to find yourself in a spot where you're kind of tucked away in a lab and you're working with stuff in a dish or with animals, and it feels very removed, right, from normal life, right?
Well, it does, but I don't think some people appreciate how removed it is at times.
What do you mean by that?
I feel that we think, at least I, maybe not others, when I was initially studying rats, although I always wanted to keep the human connection by just acquaintances or people I know or learning more about it, we think we are solving some addiction-related thing, but if we don't know what it really looks like, what are we really doing, So I appreciate people who are physician scientists. We have one here, several here in the department. And they both treat and they do research. So now they do research on something relevant, right?
Yeah, they're really interfacing.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. Yeah, no, I think it's important, to retain contact.
Yeah, and at the same time, another danger, though, for those who do retain contact, they might have a very biased vision because their clinic might only see a certain type of people or their experience. And I remember talking to a clinician saying to me, yes, the drugs have changed their brain. And I'm thinking, no, but some people are already pre-existing, have these issues, and the drug is their solution. It's not their problem. At least they think it's their solution. And they says, no, but once you take the drug, it changes your brain. I said that, but I have known so many people that were different to begin with.
Then what they're saying might be true for some people.
Yes, exactly.
But I'm just anecdotally, like, if I had to surmise, most addicts have propensities that they are set up to be an addict long before.
And they've done studies about this, and they haven't been as conclusive as I'd like to them, but probably they're biased. So they're not as conclusive, but I don't know if they're looking at a diverse enough population, or they're studying college students that are very biased.
I think the thing is too, like when you study human behavior, there's so much you can't control for, right? Some person might go to a jazz show on their Tuesday, and the other one's like running 10 miles, and the other one's doing drugs, right?
Very difficult.
There's so much you can't control for. So in order to get, a real informational signal out of it, you got to have a lot of data.
Yes.
Right?
And all of,
Either a really strong signal or enough
Absolutely.
data where you're able to sift out a signal that will look subtle, but it's actually quite informative.
Absolutely.
Right? So,
That's really important. And I think your science background can really see that, right? Yes.
yeah. So in my time on the East Coast, when I was doing a little bit of neurobiology stuff, I was working a little bit in a lab where we were doing a tissue culture model of Alzheimer's disease, essentially. So we were taking genetically modified rats that had been modified in a way where they were going to produce, say, a lot of amyloid beta or like tau tangles, and those are very mappable features that you can get cells to do in a dish, right? But I brought up the idea of like, why don't we do this, type of tissue culture work that's, very hands-on and molecular and objective for mental health stuff, right? And I was kind of surprised. I brought this up with a few different professors. Like, I think my example I used was, why can't we study, schizophrenia in a dish? And they were like, well, Mitchell, those cells are never going to be hallucinating. And like there are features there that are fundamentally human in a way that we'll never be able to represent in a dish. Like it's kind of, just a no-go. Why would we go down that route? And so I was curious to get your take on that, considering, you're working in an animal model, studying, a mental health condition for sure.
I think everything has to converge on a message. And I think one thing by itself doesn't mean much, not whether it's a human, a rat, or a dish. And I think if they all bring together to the same type of message, it's stronger. I do think there is value of studying a dish.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a push now to not just do animal models, but you do some modeling, some cultures, some human, and that's good. As long as though everyone who's involved always remember that you're trying to model what exists in a human. Otherwise, you get very far removed, and you can spend 20 years finding something that will never happen in a human.
Yeah, my thing was like, I hear what you're saying. They're probably,
Yeah.
my cells in the dish probably aren't hallucinating. But at the same time, Alzheimer's, what is late stage Alzheimer's characterized by? Hallucinations,
Exactly.
delusions.
Right. And
My cells in a dish aren't forgetting their childhood memories
Right.
either, but yet we deem this worth studying to the tune
exactly
of like...
why. Yeah. My husband does do some culture stuff for alcohol, and they add alcohol to dishes and looks at how the cells
Ethanol in a
change
lab.
and,
I've never heard of that before. Yeah.
So it's doable, or even sometimes you could get genetic lines that are one way or another and put them in a dish and look at what's different.
For sure.
Yeah, so I think I am not against it.
Yeah, me either. I just wanted to get your take.
Yeah.
The last thing we'll do before we close, so if you grab this Sharpie here with the paper.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm doing something where whoever my current guest is reads a question from the previous guest, and then they write a question to the next guest.
Okay, so this is the previous guest?
Yes. So I can't remember. I don't know what the question is, but if you want to read the question.
Okay. The question is, what would your younger self admire the most about who you are today?
Ooh.
Not much. I think my tenacity and perseverance and
Okay.
love of logic. This is more than one thing.
Yeah.
Huh?
Like a straight arrow. You're sticking to
that's
your
what
path.
my husband says. True blue.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I
I,
like that.
can write something to someone else. So it might be along those lines.
Yeah, and you don't need to do it right now. We can
Okay.
do it at the end. But I guess before we close here, do you have any final thoughts or anything you want to share or ask about or?
Not really. I just think, though, that whatever field we're in, we always have to be aware that what we think is our own brain, and we can't apply it to other people's brain
We
no
can't
matter-
assume other people are like us.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
Yes, so just
It's easy to
remember
forget.
that. It's easy to forget.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely have that where I'll like start talking about something and I forget that other people like they don't know what
Think
I'm talking
differently,
about. Yeah.
right? Yes, and also thinking that a solution that has worked for you will work for someone else, because
Yeah.
it might not.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's so vast, even like stress, right? There's some people that if they go to the dentist, they want to know exactly what's going to happen to them so that they can calm down. But there are other people's, if you tell them, they'll get more anxious. So everyone's different. Just make sure that you remember that.
It's complicated, and don't overstate the fact that it's complicated. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, all right.
Well, thank you so much.